Welcome to the Jew and Gentile podcast. I am your host, Chris Katolka, and with me is none other than the Jewish sage himself, the one and only Mr. Steve Herzig. How are you, sir?
Oh, yeah, drum roll. We're in trouble.
Big time drum roll.
That's
You're
right,
the Jewish
you are
sage.
a drummer.
I am a drummer.
We could call you the drummer boy.
I used to play drums in your house.
That's true, but we never called you the drummer boy.
You know, I always thought it was funny when Alice goes, oh, yeah, I can't listen to that music or anything with loud or anything, but she would let us come in and play drums and all the different
At least
rock
she
music.
knew where her boys were.
That's what it was all about. That's right, because I was in a band with your boys. Hold on a minute. Here we go. Welcome in. I am so glad you're with us. Thank you for tuning in if you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook. Thank you if you're tuning in and you're listening through our podcast
Thanks
feed.
for anybody that's listening.
Exactly. It's a joy to have you with us on another great podcast of the Jew and Gentile podcast where we want you to learn the Bible from a Jewish perspective. Hey, listen, right now, if you're listening, would you like and subscribe our YouTube page or maybe our Facebook page? Like and subscribe our podcast. Leave a comment. It actually, Steve, did you know that if you leave a comment on Apple and say, hey, these guys, they're an interesting group of guys, you know, or whatever.
Who would say such
I don't
a
know.
thing?
I don't know. But they maybe a kind word.
We probably have to pay somebody to say that.
That's exactly right. Well, we do. We pay them with kindness. You know?
Okay.
Well, but it moves us up the ladder of the podcast.
Where are
route.
we on the ladder? Have we even gotten on the first rung?
Well, we have 7 listeners, so I mean,
That's true. So, but how tall is the ladder?
we have to keep finding out as I keep producing material. But if they like and subscribe, we can get a better feel of how many people listen to us. So, let's see. Wait a minute. There
Which one
it is.
sounds better, the live one or the recorded one?
They actually are very similar.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
all
It
right.
is you.
All right. Well, we ended Equip with you doing what I thought was outstanding, by the way. And you wrote a chapter about it in your book, and it was a shameless plug during Equip where you talked about 3 specific leaders who influenced the coming of Israel as a state and how Christians played a vital role. In fact, tell them how they could access that. I thought it was, even though it passed already, we don't take it off. People can still see it. Tell them how they can see that.
Yeah, so we just wrapped up our series, our FOI Equip series. And remember, FOI Equip sponsors the Jew and Gentile podcast. And we did a series, 3 weeks on Israel's independence and its leaders, because Israel is celebrating 75 years since its founding, modern founding, I should say. And so we highlighted 3 of the key leaders that helped bring Israel into existence.
And 2 of them are right behind you.
Exactly. We have Eliezer ben Yehuda, which was 1. And then behind me, if I can get to there we go. If you're watching on the YouTube feed, you can see behind me.
Give a nice angle for the beards, the 2 beards that look exactly alike, yours and his.
There is Theodore Herzl behind me, and then our good friend David Ben-Gurion standing on his head.
He had more hair than you have right now.
I know. It's not good.
Hey, you're from one balding guy to another.
It's just all falling out.
It's just the way it is.
That's life. But it was a great time. And if you're interested in wanting to learn more about Israel's history, modern Israel's history and how it came to be, then I encourage you to go to our YouTube page, our FOI Equip YouTube page. You can subscribe to that YouTube page, and you can watch all of our past classes that we do for FOI Equip. You don't have to just come to the live session. It's on demand. It's like you can watch it whenever you want, Steve, whenever you want.
That is cool. And the guy we're having as a guest for our next Equip class,
June 15th,
makes me look like I have no energy and makes you look like you have no energy. The guy is running on high octane.
Dr. Mordechai KEDAR, a lecturer at Bar Ilan University. And he is a specialist in Arabic studies, Arabic history. He speaks Arabic. He's Israeli. He's Jewish. But he's the guy that you see on TV and Arabic TV arguing about the need for Israel, the fact that Israel needs to exist, all of these things. So he's going to come talk about the 6-Day War, actually.
That's going to be fantastic.
It's going to be a great time. So if you want to register for that, you can go to foiequip.org. Hey, Steve, we have a text number now that people can text us at.
We do have 424-444 1948.
424-444-1948. Hey, this question came in from area code 214. Even though this person lives in Washington State with a Dallas phone number, I like that, with a Dallas area code. This person wrote, "Yo, Chris." I like this. "Yo, Chris, can a woman be a mensch too?" Oh, great question.
That is a great question. You know, last week we talked about how to say please in Yiddish, and there really isn't. They had to use the German. It just tells you a little bit about There's no word. We don't say please. We just say, "Give me that." So the question is about, is there a word for females who are a mensch? And the technical answer is no, there isn't. You asked me about this, and I said, well, the closest thing I could think of is balabusta, and remember, Yiddish is not direct translation. It has nuance to it. It is a language of nuance. And so we looked it up. And balabusta, you were so disappointed, had to do with homemaker, being a good homemaker.
Let's rewind, though, because mensch literally means a good human being.
Yes, it
does. It means
does.
a good human being. So a mensch, you know, if you've done something good, a Jewish person, you could be Jewish or Gentile, doesn't matter. But if you've done something good for a Jewish person, they go, "You're a true mensch, a good human being."
A good human being. And a human being could be male or female.
100%.
But in the context, at least for me growing up, I used to hear mensch really for men or boys only. But a balabusta, while technically meaning homemaking, which in our culture, could be derogatory to women.
It doesn't just mean homemaking. It means a good
homemaker, which could be derogatory because a woman could say, wait, that's all I get?
Yeah.
He's a mensch.
He's a great human being,
and I'm a good homemaker.
But look at that human being. Hey, you made a nice dinner.
Fair enough. But in the context, it is used about a woman in a very good sense, not just as it relates to homemaking. Oh, she's such a balabusta. I used to hear my mom talk about it all the time.
And your mom was a hardworking woman.
100%, but she would never call herself a mensch. She would love to hear somebody call her a balabusta.
Really?
Not just in the context of a homemaker, just in general, as a great lady. Oh, you're such a balabusta. But the answer to the question is, technically, they don't use Yiddish speakers, in my hearing growing up, never used the word mensch for a woman. But balabusta, yes. So you take it for what it's worth. If somebody called this person who texted us a balabusta, don't take it in a bad way.
I'm not going to.
It's a great thing.
I just wrote back that she's the best, and thanks for being a mensch. And then she listens to our Equip classes as well. So, but I should correct that and call her a balabusta.
We'll call her a balabusta.
All right, that's great. And we've got a couple other people that texted in, but one of we got a new one here. Ron, who is a Messianic Jewish believer from South Carolina, is listening as number ? He says to y'all's podcast. So he doesn't know what number he is. So I just said, you're number 7, Ron. You're the number of completion, my friend.
That's the number of completion. We're now moved that number, our 7 listeners, however many there are.
That's right. So, hey, listen, if you've got questions, what a great question. Can a woman be a mensch?
It's a great discussion.
If you've got questions, text us at 424-444-1948. Steve, your turn.
What for what?
The number.
424-444-1948.
All right. Well, Steve,
I thought you were asking me, what am I supposed to do?
No, I wanted you to remember, if you say it 7 times, it sticks in people's minds.
That's right, the number of completion.
Do you think people have saved our phone number in their phone?
No. Not even close. They probably, they're going through the number. I'm getting some tea. I'm getting a Coke. I'm getting some tea. Wait till they get to the main stuff.
I'm going to bed.
I'm taking a shower, eating a sandwich.
That's right.
Whatever it is.
All right, Steve, last week we looked to an article that you found in Moment Magazine about life after death, kind of a Jewish perspective on it. And we looked at Amy Jill Levine last week, who is a New Testament scholar at Vanderbilt University, and how she probably didn't believe much about the New Testament at all.
She doesn't believe in life after death, doesn't believe that the Bible's inspired, and doesn't believe, she looks at the literature as important, but not the way we do.
100%. But at the end, when her mother's dying, she gives her the spiel. You're going to see Dad. You're going to live. You're going to look beautiful. And her husband goes, "Where did that come from?"
You never believe that. She said, "You're right." I don't know. Just said it.
But there's more to this article, which we wanted to bring up.
Lot. Again, the title is from this Moment magazine, which is significant. Numbers of scholars and poets and people of literature. Is there life after death? Jewish thinking on the afterlife. That's what's such a ride. This is Jewish thinking on the afterlife. If you would have asked me about that when I was in Hebrew school, at my strong belief in a Messiah and in resurrection, you go to Israel on the Mount of Olives, all the people buried there, they believed in and believe it. No, they don't now, but they believe in resurrection. So, but these Jewish people that Moment magazine has asked, many of them don't. And here's another one. Here's the title of it. There's a potpourri of writers.
Look at you, potpourri.
So here it is. All cats go to heaven. I'm doing this because Alice, my wife, loves
She
cats.
does love. You know, the first time a couple times I had come to your house when I was younger, your cat, I'm trying to think of what it would have been. Mitzi. Mitzi comes up, sits down next to me, turns her back to me and faces the other way, and Alice comes over and she goes, "Oh,
she likes you.
Mitzi likes you." And I think, this is I'm used to dogs coming up and licking, and I'm pushing them away.
No, cats, that's it. They like you. If they could turn their back to you, they trust you.
So Alice will like this one.
That's right. So here's the article. "I don't believe in an afterlife," she says. "To me, the unnecessarily clutters up expectations of life and death. Because if you expect to be rewarded or punished, you are not behaving according to what you truly believe you ought to be doing in the situation. You're expecting someone else going to give you goodies at the end. What you've got is what you've got. It increases the poignancy. You've given a life, you do the best you can, you do what you must do, what's right for you, and then you wear out and you're done." Wow. This is sad.
Yeah.
"I simply can't imagine wanting to live forever. I'm 75. I still enjoy my life, but I can imagine a time when I wouldn't. Why would I want to live on after losing so many people who are dear to me? Because even if they lived on too, you can't assume they'd be with you, can you? And I'm very attached to animals as well as people. So where would I be in the afterlife? With a bunch of dead boyfriends, plus my husband, and about 30 cats demanding attention?
Hey.
Would my cats be in the afterlife? Why would they have an afterlife if I do? Wouldn't they have an afterlife if I do? They're better behaved than I am." That's from Marge Piercy. She's a novelist and a poet. Her most recent collection is The Hunger Moon, New and Selected Poems from 1980 to 2010.
I was going to say,
what?
This is written by I was thinking this has got to be written by like the way it just spills out. You know, am I going to live with my boyfriends and my husband
and my 30 cats? It's just, but the reason I want to read these each time, when we have several of them, as I said, you're going to get a diversity of thoughts amongst Jewish people, the chosen people, the givers of the Bible, the promised chosen people. And look at where we are. Look at where we are. It's amazing.
It's almost like she loves cats, but she doesn't want to be surrounded by her 30 cats for eternity. You know, that's what she's saying.
Or her husband or her ex-boyfriend.
It was interesting, though, when she said that it makes life count more if you know there's nothing coming. It makes it more poignant. But, you know, that's not what the Bible teaches. That's not what especially the New Testament teaches about the fact that what we do now definitely has an impact on eternity. And we will be accounted for the things that we've done. Every moment is a poignant moment for a Christian because 100%. It's going to be presented. And whether or not your work is something that, what does it say in Corinthians where it talks about the fact that it will be burned, you know, and if it survives in its work that was
at the bema seat of judgment. There is a judgment for everyone. It's which one are you at?
Exactly.
And once you're there, you know if there's good news or bad news. At the Great White Throne, which we'll talk about later in our series as we trounce through Revelation.
That's right.
Stomp through Revelation versus the Bema seat or the judgment seat for believers.
For believers, right.
Two different places, two different judgments.
Your life is still poignant as a believer. And I think that's important because I understand what she's saying. You better live your life to the fullest because it's done when it's done. And I think to myself, nope, life's poignant because when we stand before Christ, all of these things will matter when we stand before Him.
It is very interesting what people think. And funerals are the place to really find out what people think.
Oh, 100%. But we're in Revelation chapter 17.
We are in Revelation chapter 17. And Chris,
get us out of Revelation 17, Steve.
Yeah, we're near the end here. And, we talked about last week, we talked about Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. And we talked about how the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints and martyrs of Jesus, and how this Babylon, this religious Babylon, ends up in this chapter being really trounced by the Antichrist, destroyed. In verse 15, it says, "Then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are people, multitudes, nations, and tongues." So it tells us who this harlot is. "And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot." So it's going to be raised up, the system that's going to be embraced, and then the same people are going to crush it. Mm-hmm. They're going to crush it, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. And Chris, this sentence, I read this over the weekend because I knew we were going to talk about it. And we often talk about the sovereignty of God. And does God allow things? Does he make things happen? And people say, if God is sovereign, then that means he's the author of evil. Well, look at what it says. "For God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose." Mm-hmm. So God is in charge of everyone and everything for a purpose, for a unique purpose, to be of one mind and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. This all has to do with fulfillment. And we talked about Jewish view on life after death. When God chose the Jewish people, he chose them for a purpose. Even before he chose the Jewish people. Remember, we talked about it so many times. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, right after the fall, there would be the seed of the woman who would solve the problem that man created, even though God put them in a wonderful place. Man blew it. God could have destroyed everything. Instead, he had a program and plan. Mm-hmm. And here at the last book in the Bible, he is saying, until the words of God are fulfilled, completed. That's amazing. "And the woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth."
That's the point of what this woman is that it's, again, we had been mentioning for weeks now, it's the system that has been set up. And ultimately, the Antichrist wants control over everything. But it's the city that everybody was looking to for economic prosperity, for lust, to find purpose in life. That's where they turned. And it's not just the individuals who are going there, your average citizens. The kings of the world were looking to this city for lust, for fulfillment, for economic reasons.
And in John's day, you're describing Rome.
Rome, 100%.
This is John's day. Now we fast forward. Has anything changed?
Not one bit.
Not one bit. Except now, instead of chariots with horses, we have cars. Instead of public bathrooms, the Roman bathrooms, which are a riot if you ever get a chance. Reading a newspaper next to 25 other guys.
Yeah, exactly. That's your worst nightmare.
My worst nightmare. Almost every Jewish person's worst nightmare. But now we have, in fact, think about it, Chris. Back in Roman days, a bathroom was a luxury. It was a luxury. Today, we count it as a necessity. But it's interesting that for more years than not, men and women had outhouses, glorified outhouses. So the point is, I don't know how we got onto that, but
I'm waiting.
The point is luxuries. There was this. Rome was in love with luxuries. Rome was in love with business. We're going to see that in chapter 18. They were always, whatever culture it is. I'm reminded in Acts when you had that situation where the gal was making money for a group of people, and she got saved, and she was they took Satan out of her, or the demons out of her, and business went down. Business is always at the center of things, and that's what's happening here at the end. That we're towards the end now of the 7-year period, and it's the last of the bowl judgments.
I think people, we always kind of isolate these accounts in the Bible for, that's in the, and we know it's the future, but you just kind of go, that's the way things were then. But the human heart hasn't changed. That's we might have cell phones now, and we have a podcast and all this technology, and we can drive and fly, but still, I guarantee whatever issues man was dealing with inside his heart 2,000, 3,000, it's the same. It's the exact same. And what's amazing to me is, what was coming to my mind as you were talking is, and again,
when is he going to stop?
Yeah, exactly. In a couple chapters. But, again, for our listeners, I'm not equating what I'm about to say to the text here. I'm just giving an example. But my mind went to when the French President Macron went to China and shook the hand of Xi Jinping, the premier of the Chinese Communist Party. And it's amazing to me how he switched, he's balancing his approach, because he's looking at the world and saying the influence of the American way of life, the American influence over the world, he sees it probably as diminishing. And he's looking around and saying, where is the power? Where is the influence? Where is the money? Where is all of the things that we're attracted to? Where is it that I can go find it and make an allegiance to it? And so he's kind of riding the line right now. And what's interesting is that if you notice, the values of the Chinese Communist Party and the values of the West are completely contrary to one another, but that didn't bug him at all. We're talking about the enslavement of people in China, slave labor. I mean, all these horrible things that are human rights atrocities, but yet there's a Westerner going over and shaking hands and saying, I like what you have going on here. Why? Because you're attracted to those things and you want to latch yourself onto them, as the kings of the world were latching themselves onto this woman and the beast, and latching themselves on for that influence, for that power. That's what they were hungry for. And it all is going to change here at the end of chapter 17 and
Chris,
18.
you don't have to use the French president. You could use Nike if you want. You could use the NBA using China. It's market share. They will protest things in the United States, the freest, the country that gives the most opportunity. Not perfect, but certainly gives the most opportunity, that is preaching freedom and has opportunity for people to protest freely, and they defend or don't say anything about China as it relates to the pocketbook.
100%.
That's what happened to the NBA. That's what happened to Nike. It happened.
Oh, I have say something about Taiwan, and they're going, "Oh, we're really sorry. We
by
didn't
the
realize."
way, consumers too. Consumers are that way. The bottom line is, you're buying for your family, and something costs X number of dollars, and you could get the same product for less. It's made in China. It's a stress that all of us make. I cannot tell you how often. I just saw an ad with my wife we were watching over the weekend. It's Memorial Weekend, and we're watching a commercial for a flag company, U.S. flag.
I saw that.
And it's made in America. I said to Alice, let's buy that flag. They 100%, they emphasize, look, we are everything is made in America. We get the material from America, we put it together in America, we ship it. And guess what? That's a way for me to support America. Now it's a small thing. People do read now. There are people who say, you know what? I don't want to support that particular thing because look at who they are.
Right.
And it's going over into beer now. It's going into baseball. It's going into retail stores. People are looking at, wait a minute, who's behind this, and do I want to support it?
That's right.
It's interesting. The people who usually are the most aggravated are people, they might not necessarily be believers. Many of them are, but they definitely hold a high regard to God and to their religious beliefs, and they're against what to them is anti-God and anti-religious.
Which again, you see those people are often called bigots, and they're put down, and that's why you come. Now, I'm not saying, of course, that's happening here in the United States, but what it was is the system that the woman, verse 6, was drunk with the blood of God's holy people. The idea that the values clashed enough that these people were standing in the way of giving whatever everybody else wanted in the world to fulfill their lusts, their pride, all of these things.
And remember, they would not take the mark. These are people, I think there'll be some people who won't take the mark who aren't believers. I think eventually they will be believers, but they're people who say, you know what? I'm not doing this. I don't like this. This is so interesting, this period of time, and how we can tie it into a future time, see how people respond, and kind of mimic it before it happens. We can actually be doing some of the things they're doing, even though we're not required to. I said boycotting. If you refuse the mark of the beast, you're boycotting the system.
Right.
And you're being marked out. And it's happening now to people. It's fascinating.
It really is. Can I read the beginning in chapter 18?
Sure.
Really
You
quick?
want to move along, I could tell.
Well, I'm excited to be in another chapter
We don't
right
want
now.
We don't want to stomp through, right?
It says this in chapter 18, verse 1. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven. He had a great authority, and the earth was illuminated by his splendor. With a mighty voice, he shouted, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She's become a dwelling place for demons and a haunt for every impure spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable animal." It's interesting, Steve, that they're highlighting unkosher. You know, it's amazing how they
unclean.
But isn't it amazing how theologians try to go, oh, this has nothing to do with Israel or the Jewish people, and yet here it's highlighting the uncleanness from a kosher perspective that goes back to the Old Testament. So anyway, it's interesting.
I think that's a good call.
It says this: "For all the nations have drunk the maddening wine of her adulteries. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries." We were just talking about that, Steve. There
Yep.
it is, the desire for lust, the desire for prosperity. They were getting fat off of Babylon. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues, for her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her crimes. Give back to her as she is given, pay her back double for what she has done, pour her a double portion for her own cup, give her as much torment and grief as glory and luxury she gave herself. In her heart she boasts, I sit enthroned as queen, I am not a widow, I will never mourn. Therefore in one day her plagues will overtake her, death, mourning, and famine. She will be consumed by fire, for mighty is the Lord God who judges her."
You know, Chris, he starts off after these things. And that's an expression that's used often in Revelation. And it has to do with, first of all, time thing, after what preceded. And then John either sees or hears or both, which means it's a great reminder. John is a spectator. It's like he's going to IMAX movie.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He is the spectator. He is given the privilege of seeing what will take place, even though, remember at the very beginning, what is, and is to come. And so he's aware of what was from the scripture. He's aware of what is, because that's where he is, and he's seeing the future, and he's a spectator. And this is spectacular. This makes anything Disney does, or this angel lights it up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literally lights it up. Well, look, it says illuminating with great glory.
I like the way you put it. It lights it up.
John is the spectator, and he is watching. You know, I used to, back in the day, when we first moved to the Philadelphia area, the Philadephia Phillies on July 4th always had a fireworks weekend.
Yep.
And it was, when we first moved here, wasn't aware of where fireworks were, so we started to do that. We did that several years. Everybody loves to watch fireworks. It lights up. You see it everywhere. It lights up the skies. That's nothing compared to what's going to happen in chapter 18. And notice the nations are drunk with the wine of the wrath of her fornication. It's just, he's a holy God, has a holy servant, and is encouraging believers in this period of time. They're believers here, and they're subject to the same thing we're subject to, being tainted by the world. We all are. It's a struggle. It's a stress that we all have, and it's so easy to get consumed, if you will, with consumer things.
I'm glad you brought that up, because the point of this section of the passage is that it's telling these believers that are living there at this time to escape, to get out, judgment's coming, but also not to commingle. And this, Steve, this is the story of the scriptures. It's not just a New Testament issue. The story of commingling in the Old Testament as well.
It's always been that way. Modern Judaism, when I was growing up, that's not necessarily modern, that's ancient history, but all of it, that's what they teach you. We eat different. We worship different. We dress different. We have to be different. We are called to be a separate people. Yet, when you read, look, we're going through what Jewish people believe about death. Some of the things, we've already read two things, both very intelligent, very respected scholars, writers, taking a topic that's biblical and giving their own spin to it.
Right.
Jewish people are notorious. I'm an example. Many of us are examples of, is this what I'm supposed to do? Forget it. Yeah. I'm going the other way. And that's exactly what this angel is saying. Lighting up the place. Don't do this.
That's right. And it's the same thing that we deal with, is but we've been called to be separate from the world, to look different from the world. And you know what happens is, over time, even in our evangelicalism, we start to adapt to what the world is doing and embracing what the world is doing. And I'm not even talking about, music or anything like that. I'm just talking about the actual culture that surrounds us. And all of a sudden we begin to look and we sound and we embrace the world, instead of being not people who hate the world. Jesus didn't come, it says, to condemn what was going on, but he brought life. And we should be the life bringers, or the ones who carry the life through the eternal gospel, as it says in Revelation. But yeah, what happens is we get consumed by the culture that surrounds us. And it's just that this is a picture of what's going to happen in the future, but it's also a reminder for us today not to embrace, to come out of her, my people, it says, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues. Because the point is, I think I've said this before, the world it's a sinking ship. So are you going to be the violinist on the Titanic and play till the water or swallows up the Titanic? Or are you going to be the person that's talking about the life raft that's been provided by Christ?
Well, when Paul wrote his letter to the Romans, you know what he testified? He said, that which I should do, I don't do. And that which I don't do, I should do. Oh, wicked man that I am. Now, biblical scholars, try to talk about, was Paul saved when he wrote that, or was he unsaved? I have the conviction he was saved. He was under stress. The things that, as unsaved, things don't necessarily bother you. When you get saved, they bother you.
Yep.
I can give you countless examples of that. And so there's a stress now. We're talking about that in the church, the bride of Christ. There's a stress in the future during this week of this last week, 7 years. God calling out 144,002. By this time, the two have already been raptured up. They've been dead and resurrected up. So these 144,000 are still around. They're protected. And they're preaching the gospel, and people are getting saved. I don't know how many thousands there might be during this period, but this is who John is writing to. And remember, he's watching all this. He's hearing all this. I wonder what he was when it ends, when this revelation of Christ ends at a great crescendo of a new heaven, a new earth. We'll talk about that. I would have liked to interview him after the fact. He must have been wiped out. What
emotions.
All the different things he saw and heard and experienced, things that no man has experienced before. We could
have had him on the Jew and Gentile podcast.
He would have said, no, I need more than 7
No, he
people.
would have said this.
He would have. It is interesting as we get to this segment. We'll have to postpone the rest.
We are in chapter 18. I'm happy
Moving
to
right
say
along.
we have left chapter 17. We're one chapter away, Steve, from some good news that's coming. But Steve, before we get to our Yiddish word of the day, we've got to get through some news first, and we've got some good stuff. So take it away.
We do have some interesting stuff. I was looking this morning at the Jerusalem Post, and I was confronted, Chris, with this headline: "Deep Faking It. America's 2024 election collides with AI boom." Now, Chris, this comes from the Jerusalem Post, who took it from Reuters. Okay, so it's a Reuters article, but it's in the Jerusalem Post.
Yes.
That means that English readers who are, of course, it's a worldwide newspaper. Jerusalem Post is an Israeli newspaper. And here they're talking about AI. And listen, Chris, this was actually an AI written thing. And they start off with this quote: "I actually like Ron DeSantis a lot. Hillary Clinton reveals in a surprise online endorsement video, he's just the kind of guy this country needs. I really mean that." That's an AI written thing. And they,
But with her face, I mean, people are looking at it. It's not really her.
This
though.
article is about the current rise to AI, which uses images, your voice, and writing, sometimes combining all three.
That means that pretty soon you and I could just go on vacation and we get some AI people up in here, and they're just doing
the AI Jew and Gentile podcast.
I think the thing might smoke, and we might break AI if we did that. I don't know.
Yeah. But the future is now with this AI.
It came I know they were developing it for a long time, but it just, boom, appeared out of nowhere. And now it's a real concern with people, especially the creators of this stuff. That's what's so scary to me, is that the very people that created it are the very people that are saying you probably should be careful of using AI.
According to this article, there's a couple things. There have been 3 times as many video deep fakes of all kinds and 8 times as many voice deep fakes posted online this year compared to the same time period in 2022. And it's going to be used even more. It goes on to, in total, 500,000 video and voice deep fakes will be shared on social media sites globally in 2023. Chris, we won't be able to tell what's kosher and what's trade.
Forget Russian interference. I mean, this is AI interference. These people will be making deep fakes, and people won't know what to... I mean, of course, Hillary Clinton would never endorse Ron DeSantis, but it does create a situation with social media, AI, all of it.
100%. The Republican National Committee in late April had a 30-second ad which the RNC disclosed as being entirely generated by AI. Now, that might not necessarily be bad, Chris. We know that on your own iPhone, you could get your own AI app that could write poems, that could write letters, and hey, there are people right now, couples using AI to write their wedding vows.
Yep, 100%.
And there are people, Christians, commentators who do marriage ceremonies, who are concerned about, be careful what it writes. Do you believe it or not? It's crazy.
Creativity is going out the window. We're just going to say, hey, computer, do this for me, and it's done. It's crazy.
Well,
you downloaded it on your phone recently.
I did, because I talked to you about it. Listen, I talked to my son about it. They're using it. He's a high school teacher. I asked him how he's able to differentiate, and he said he isn't always able to do that. But they're taking courses now and seminars on dealing with it. But it's just an interesting phenomenon that is happening, and I think the technology is ahead of how we can do it. But let's go back to Rome, Chris. Rome didn't have AI. They had slaves.
That's right.
So it's still no different. You had back then slaves doing everything for you. Guy would get up. He had slaves. They dressed him. They brought his food to him. They worked for him. He didn't have to do any labor. All he had to do was lounge around. The rich ones. Now, AI, do you realize there was an article, 300,000 jobs at fast food places are going to go out the door because of AI.
Will you miss that? Will you miss the work? I always wonder, the AI might be nicer to me. Except for Chick-fil-A.
I think they'll be more efficient. But listen, I got started at a fast food.
Of course.
At a fast food place. When I managed a fast food chicken place, the number
you
one...
managed it?
I managed it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was in college and I managed Chicken Delight. Don't cook tonight, call Chicken Delight. And
at 424-444-1948.
But you know what the problem was back then? Employees.
Yep.
18, 17, 16 years old who were working, who said they would show up and they don't. The AI people have already said 50% of the time the employees, human employees, do what they're supposed to do, as they have a list of things when an order comes, how to say it, what to say, and etc. Trying to add on to the order. You know what AI does? 100%.
Yeah.
The point is, from this article, again, in the Jerusalem Post, America's election is in trouble.
Big time. Big time.
Big time.
All right. Well, the next one, Steve, is something to be talked about. It's this comes from Jerusalem Post as well. Israel's Knesset to hold judicial selection committee vote on June 14th. The committee will be required to appoint a woman to one of each of the roles, including justices, Knesset members, ministers, and bar association members. The confidential Knesset vote to choose the legislature's 2 spots on the judicial selection committee will be held on June 14th. Knesset member MK Amir Ohana from Likud, that's Benjamin Netanyahu's party, announced that late Monday night at what could be a crucial moment in the ongoing talks at the president's residence between the coalition and the opposition over the government's proposed judicial reforms.
That's a mouthful, Chris. Why don't you just tell them? We had an editorial written by some guy named Chris Katulka about this, and you can let's drive them to that issue. Do you remember what issue it is?
Well, the big situation right now with the judicial reform boils down to 2 big problems in Israel's Supreme Court and how it's made up. In my opinion, other people might disagree.
That's
with
right.
me.
You wrote an editorial.
It was an
about
editorial. That's right. And the point was that right now the way that a vacancy in the Supreme Court is filled is that it has to, number one, a nominee is brought forth by the president of Israel, who isn't really even elected directly by the people. They're elected by the representatives of the Knesset, but that's a whole group of people. He's removed from the individual. So that's number one. Number two, then there's a committee of people who choose whether or not this person is going to be a good fill for the vacancy in the Supreme Court. That's one big issue, because it kind of removes the voice of the people from selecting a Supreme Court justice. In America, you actually have 2 options. The president nominates somebody, so the president is directly elected by the people of America. The electorate speaks, and then the Senate gets the opportunity to put forth and to approve the appointee.
And they don't always match parties.
Nope.
The Senate could have the majority of one party that's different from the president. You have a lot of give and take. It's a political kind of thing, but the Supreme Court justices don't pick themselves.
They don't. And that's the thing, is that within the Israeli system, the president nominates, and again, he's kind of removed from the electorate. And then there's a judicial a committee, not the Senate, not the prime minister, a judicial committee that makes the choice. And that's the reason why, honestly, the Israel Supreme Court has looked politically much different. Not that politics matter in the courts, but that it's looked completely different.
But it does matter, Chris.
Because
we would make the argument that Supreme Court justices in the United States, while always saying they're not political, we know some lean to the right. the last Supreme Court justice was leaning far left. If you read her cases, you knew which way she was going to go most of the time, not all the time. The same thing, the previous woman who under the previous administration came, she leaned to the right. There is a view of the in the United States of the Constitution, similarly the way the Bible is viewed. Is it a living document, or is it the way it was intended when it was written? Mm-hmm. Chris, you and I are biblical conservatives. Mm-hmm. We believe that the Bible should be interpreted by the text itself, when it was written, to whom it was written, and is not a living document.
It's living, but it's living.
Well, it's
in its literal form.
It's always in its literal. We take it literally. Yes, it's living. It's alive. It's sharper than any double-edged sword.
I just don't want to get text. That's all.
Yeah, no problem. I need it to be corrected. But in politics, in our country today, there's right-leaners and there's left-leaners and there's people who are diplomats right in the middle. But how is it viewed? I think that's really important. And as we look at this, look, we're in America. We have opinion. Oh, do we have opinions?
Yeah, and
you're a Gentile with opinions. I'm Jewish with opinions.
Well, and the Israeli political system is vastly different than the American political system.
Very different.
Over here we have three branches of government. We have the executive. We have the legislative, and then we have the judicial, and there's a balance of powers among them. In Israel, it is different. The prime minister is a part of the legislature, so there isn't a separation of power there. And the Supreme Court, the problem is who is the one that's in control. And the problem is that when the legislature makes a law over there, the Supreme Court can kind of just rise up and go, well, we don't really know if that's a good law or not. And then they go, all right, well, what law are you basing that? Well, there really isn't a law. We don't like it. So based on reasonableness, that's what they say, we're not going to let that happen. And I was reading that the Supreme Court shot down 22 Israeli legislative laws in a course of 30 years. So you have to imagine people elect people to make laws, and then the judicial branch just comes in and says, we don't like it, shut it down. That's not really that's not healthy. So there are two big reasons that they're doing this, and this is they're aligning these two big issues to try to change the judicial reform.
And it hit a nerve, Chris. It definitely hit a nerve
among a lot of people.
So,
yes,
no question, it is something that the Israelis have to decide. But you did write an opinion piece.
At the end of the opinion piece, which you can read at israelmyglory.org, which I hope you do. It's called Who Rules the Roost. At the end, I say, no matter what the choice is, praise the Lord, democracy is at work in Israel.
Amen and amen.
We got one more piece, Steve, and I don't know if you want to highlight that one.
I think you should do it.
All right. The other one, if I got to get it up here now, the other one has to do with
Rabbi Edelstein.
That's right. 200,000 gather. This is another J post. 200,000 gather as a senior ultra-Orthodox Rabbi Edelstein is laid to rest.
100 years old, Chris. He was 100 years old. And the picture in the Jerusalem Post is black hats.
As far as you can see.
As far as you could see, black coats. It just shows Israel is considered a secular state, but it is complicated. And this shows 100-year-old rabbi he's a big mocker. He was a big mocker. He had thousands of people follow his every word. He was the kind of rabbi that in the Knesset, the very religious people, before they voted, would consult with the Rebbe.
That's amazing.
It's amazing to think about. And that's why I think it's important that our listeners Israel's a complicated place. And the rabbi was a great sage. He was a great sage. I'm chopped liver.
No,
but
you have the Holy Spirit, my friend.
That right.
Sets you apart
that
big
does.
time.
That
big time.
does.
All right, Steve, here we go.
All right, Chris, I got to be very careful of our Yiddish word for the day. We had a woman who was drunk with the blood of the saints, and we had in chapter 18 they were drunk with the luxuries they had. And so the Yiddish word is for drunk, shicker.
Candy.
Shicker.
Candy is dandy, but liquor is shicker. As I read online about it, shicker means to be drunk. And so they were
shicker.
drunk. They were drunk on the heart.
Last week we covered the shiksa, riding the horse, right? Riding the beast, rather. Riding the beast. So the shiksa is shicker.
No, they're shicker on the shiksa.
Ay.
Oh, that's great. All right, everybody. That's our Yiddish word of the day. Shicker, right? Shicker. Oh, yeah, I got to be careful.
Say it slow.
I'm going to stop right now. Hey, everybody, text us 424-444-1948. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to go to foiequip.org, and there you can register for our upcoming class, June 15th, Thursday night, 7:30, with Dr. Mordecai KEDAR, talking about the Six-Day War, straight from Israel, Steve. He's going to be meeting with us.
Amazing.
So it's going to be a great time. Be sure to join us on that. Hey, thanks so much for being with us, and we will see you next week.